It's time for CrownTalk, presented by Exhibit A, your official RiverKings hockey podcast. Here's your host, TJ Chillot.
Well, hello and welcome to the first edition of CrownTalk, presented by Exhibit A. I'm TJ Chillot, voice of the RiverKings, and in this periodic podcast, I'll cover every corner of the RiverKings, from downstairs in the locker room all the way on up top, to keep you up to date with everything black and gold. I just want to be clear before we get this podcast up and running, this is going to serve as an opinion piece. So, for official news, transactions, releases, and all the in-stone information from the team, visit RiverKings.com to stay up to date. On our maiden voyage today, there's two really big topics I want to touch on. And as we look at the calendar, believe it or not, it's time for coaches to have their protected lists in. I know, it's crazy how time flies. It feels like it was just October 20th, and the RiverKings were getting their first victory of the year over the Knoxville Ice Bears. Well, we won't officially know who's on the protected lists until later in May, early June, when the league finally releases them. I'm going to go ahead and predict who I think Coach Landmesser is going to hang on to and who he's going to leave vulnerable to other teams in the SPHL. Plus, we'll take a look back 1 year ago to see how the guys that Coach Landmesser decided to protect back then, how they fared, and who played here and who played elsewhere and who never really made it. So we'll take a look at that. But to start this episode, I want to begin on a little bit of a bittersweet note, and I think everybody by now has heard the news that Devin Mantha, team captain, has officially retired. He accepted a position to coach alongside his dad in the North American Hockey League. So anybody who's familiar with the NAHL, it's alongside the USHL with developing American talent in the lower levels. There's a handful of guys in the SPHL who played in the NAHL who are already playing. So Devin Mantha, the assistant coach of the Brookings Blizzard, Brookings, South Dakota, right on the border of South Dakota and Minnesota. He'll join his dad in an assistant coaching role, and I think all of us were privileged enough to see him on the ice. Some of you may have seen him off the ice with community events and things. I know I sure did, with community events and running community development for the RiverKings for a short period of time. Plus, you know, we traveled the road, and I would see Devin and how he communicates with people and fans. I think an assistant captain role, an assistant coaching role for him is absolutely right up his alley. It's almost like something that's been the plan all along. He was a captain both on the ice for the RiverKings. He had one of the most dynamic seasons we've seen from a RiverKings forward in the SPHL era, to the point where he's changed the record books. As we take a look throughout the record books in the SPHL, the RiverKings have, Devin Mantha currently owns 5 records. As we take a look at him, he is the all-time points leader in the SPHL era for the RiverKings. He's the all-time goals and assists leader for the RiverKings in the SPHL era. He also is the playoff goals leader as well. So, that was 4 records that he currently owns. Not to mention, he is second in games played and second in playoff games played, behind only Matt Harrington, who's been here 1 season longer than him. So I think everybody out there who knows Devin Mantha, whether it's on a professional level, a personal level, wishes him the best. I know I certainly do. He was a phenomenal guy, a great leader. You know, he reminds me of a speak softly and carry a big stick type of guy. You know, he wasn't the type that I ever saw anyway. I'm sure the guys in the locker room could probably prove me wrong with one simple example, but I never saw him really raise his voice. I never saw him really be too over the top with emotions. He always seemed to have his emotions in check, and I think that served him very well as captain, because it set the calm and cool. That was the motif of the room. You know, that calm, cool, collected was just the aura that surrounded everybody, and it really relaxed the team before they went out on the ice. And when I say, speak softly, he certainly did that, and he certainly carried a big stick, 58 points, the most points in his career as a RiverKing, and of course the most points now for a single season for any player for the RiverKings in the SPHL. So Devin Mantha, congratulations on the position. We wish you all the best of luck with Brookings, coaching alongside your dad Mo and really taking that next step. We hope one day to see you as a head coach, if not in the SPHL, certainly above and beyond. Whatever you want, whatever you're looking forward to, we know certainly Devin's going to do a great job. He is absolutely the prototype hockey player that Coach Landmesser looks for, and that is, you can see that because Mantha's not the only prototype on this team as far as we look at some of these guys, and I think that all stems down from the top. It comes from your coach, and it comes from your captain, and it weeds its way down. So congratulations, Devin Mantha, on getting the assistant coaching job with Brookings Blizzard. We're certainly going to miss you around the arena, and we know we're going to miss your production out on the ice. So the big question, I guess, with Mantha's exit, really, who's going to be the next captain? And there's always the possibility that Coach Landmesser decides not to go with a captain. He has that right to just forego a C on anyone's chest. But for the sake of argument and because it's fun, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the options. Who do we think is going to be team captain for the RiverKings? Coach Landmesser was very lucky in 17-18 with Devin Mantha because he never took a call-up to the ECHL, and I think one of the things that you would want from your captain is you want stability. I don't think you want to award a captain position to someone who in 2 months may be gone for the rest of the season, because then it just kind of, I don't want to say it waters down the position, but if you're a guy who's on the third or fourth line of the team and your chances of making the ECHL are a little bit slimmer, probably a lot slimmer, you want to know that guys that you're playing with and the leaders on this team are also going to be there. Otherwise, it just kind of looks like, a new employee's coming in and, he's all right, well, he got promoted at a different store, so why did I even listen to him when he was here in the first place? So it just kind of, it looks a little bit different. So I think that's one thing that really plays into it, is going to be someone who will stay here the whole time. Plus, they have to have a little bit of RiverKings. They need to know this team. I think it's very, very unlikely that after all the moving and shaking happens and the season turns around, I think it's extremely unlikely that someone is wearing the C who is not on this team for all of last year, if not more. On the other side, it has to be a guy who's got the right attitude, and it's got to be the guy who, much like Mantha, produces on the ice. And it doesn't necessarily mean stats, but I mean backing guys up. I mean, being a leader, someone that the whole room can follow. And my gut goes to, immediately everyone wants to say, well, Ryan Marcoux, here's a guy that wore an A. Let's look at the two guys that wore A's this season and take a look. Well, the question with both those guys, Ryan Marcoux, Matt Harrington, really, are they returning next year? I think it's likely that both guys return next year, or at least opt to return, whether or not Coach Landmesser decides to protect them, and if they actually end up, playing here, or if they end up leaving here to go somewhere else. That whole chestnut, let's completely ignore that. Let's just assume that they both opt to return. I think they both will opt to return, and both will be playing for the RiverKings next year in 18-19. Ryan Marcoux and Matt Harrington. You take a look at both of these guys. They both have long tenure. Marcoux, this will be his 5th year. It will be the 7th year for Matt Harrington. Do you immediately give it to one of those guys? I think Marcoux has a little bit more of an edge because of the fact that his play on the ice is a little bit more consistent than Matt's. Matt is, nearing the twilight of his career. I mean, Ryan really is nearing the twilight of his career as well. And I don't think Matt Harrington wants the pressure of being the captain, so to speak. Again, this is entirely an opinion piece, so he could be listening and he can come up into the office and just smack me. That's totally fine. But I don't think he wants the pressure of the captain position on the team. I think he would do well at it if he wanted to accept it. But I don't know if he wants that pressure. I see him being an A once again. I see him being one of the A's on this team. My gut tells me that Ryan Marcoux is probably the next C if he can kind of get the leadership qualities down. I don't want to say he's not a leader, but there's certain things that need to happen for the captain, and you need to be okay with being the focus of attention, but not always in a good light. Anybody who's met Ryan Marcoux outside of the game knows he is a absolute just ball of fun. The guy loves to have a lot of fun, but it's being able to turn that ability to have fun off that really is something that he would have to learn as being a captain. So I think if he's planning on sticking around for a couple years, and only Coach Landmesser and Ryan himself know what his plans are for this coming year, the years after, and so on and so forth, but I think that's something he would have to grow into. I have a couple dark horse options as well that I think may pop up into Coach Landmesser's mind as he's thinking about who he's going to slap the C on. Number one, Brantley Sherwood. And I know everybody, you're sitting there thinking and you're going, you're completely contradicting yourself. Sherwood's one of the biggest class clowns that this team has. He is. But when it comes to leadership and people following, it always seems to be that wherever Sherwood's going for lunch, the guys are going for lunch. He seems to be one of those guys that just has an influence. He's been around this team this will be his third season, assuming, again, that he's here and he's playing in 18-19 for the RiverKings. This will be his third season. And he also, like Mantha, carries that big stick. On the other side, though, he doesn't speak softly, which isn't necessary, but Sherwood was the guy who really stepped up. When Jake Schultz went up into the ECHL and the RiverKings didn't really have a fighting threat, so to speak, Sherwood was the one that was out there. He was the one mixing it up, and I've heard numerous stories from players about how he defends guys on the ice. He will be immediately out there, and he has everyone's back, and I'm sure all of these guys do, but a little bit more so I've heard about Sherwood. So I think he's a dark horse candidate at least to get a letter. I can see him sliding up and being a captain because this is a guy that so far has not yet had an ECHL call-up. So if you're looking for somebody that's stability at that captain position, I think he's a perfect opportunity. My other dark horse, and he entirely depends on what he's going to do as far as is he going to get called up, would be Donald Oliveri. Here's a guy who's one of the older guys on the team in terms of age. He's been around the SPHL. He's been around the ECHL. He's a guy that I know he absolutely loves Mississippi. He's a guy who is definitely team first. He's a guy that knows the momentum swings of this game. He's the guy that understands other people and can get them in the right mindset. It's just a matter of, is he going to take any more call-ups? And it's interesting because now you're talking a defensive captain. And defensive captains, the teams tend to take on a defensive complexion if built correctly. And, oh, by the way, I don't know if you know this, you probably do because it's really common knowledge. Coach Landmesser, the former defensive captain of the RiverKings, it may be the second coming of that in that regard. Coach Landmesser was an offensive defenseman, wore the C for a number of years, now has his number hanging in the rafters. I don't think that it's going to go that far for Donald Oliveri, but number 3, wearing the C on the front really could strengthen this team from the back end out. And I think he has the maturity level to really lead this team from the back end. Switching our focus over to the protected list because, we could sit here all day and talk about who we think is going to be the next captain, but ultimately that's Coach Landmesser's decision, and he'll go ahead and he'll make that decision after training camp, after signings, and before the season. So we'll know that a little bit later. Switching our focus, though, to something that's a little bit more time pertinent, let's take a look at the protected list. Now, the protected list is due from the coaches to the league somewhere around the middle of May, and then the league will officially release all the teams all at once, and then the teams in conjunction with that towards the end of May, early June. I don't have the exact dates on all that. I'll keep you posted via Twitter, via Facebook, as of course. You can always check out RiverKings.com for the official list once it comes out. So that's coming close. And before we predict what's going to be on the 18-19 roster in terms of what my guess is and what my inference is from this roster and who I would select if I was a coach, I want to take a look back at 17-18 list because it's a very interesting list. It really got me thinking in terms of going forward trying to get into that mindset of a coach. I've never coached professional hockey, nor will I ever pretend that I did. But it kind of, when you can see where you're coming from, you might be able to see a little bit better where you're going. I want to take a look at the 17-18 list. Let's go ahead and I'm going to give you a rundown of the players and what it means. So Colin Bradshaw, he ended up playing in Europe for all of last season. Dylan Fox, Matt Harrington, Devin Mantha, Ryan Marcoux, all four of those guys, they were here. Joe Sova, he was traded. Mike Moran retired. I mean, that was your rookie of the year. He led the RiverKings in scoring last season and just up and retired. So those are the things that, even if Coach Landmesser knew that Mike Moran was retiring, you have to protect him. I mean, in the sense that in case he goes all Mike Fisher and decides to come out of retirement, Michael Jordan, and decides to come out of retirement, you don't want to leave him susceptible to other teams. So you got to hang the tag on him. Derek Sutliff, Richie Coyne, those two guys played. They were here for the entire season, aside from Sutliff's little stint in the ECHL. Mike Grace retired. Sam Higgins retired. And then there was Pete DeSalvo, who was traded, and then Brad Barone, who ended up signing as a free agent in Roanoke. So when we take a look at those numbers, 6 out of the 13 guys who were protected by Coach Landmesser suited up in black and gold this season. And for a good portion of the season, like I said, you take out Dylan Fox and Derek Sutliff's extended stays in the ECHL, the rest of these guys played the whole year here. Devin Mantha was here the whole year. Ryan Marcoux was here the whole year. Richie Coyne was here the whole year. He was hurt for a good portion of it. But you're talking about guys that were here for the whole chunk of the season. And that's what you're looking for when you go forward and you're putting your protected list forward. You have to protect the guys that you know are that good. Because if the ECHL wants them, well, then for sure other teams in the SPHL want them. I mean, that's common sense. That's not hard to really figure out. Here is my guess going forward in regards to the RiverKings and who I would protect if I was the head coach of this team. Now, I only know the tip of the iceberg. I don't know necessarily what these guys, what their skills are outside of what I see during the games that I broadcast. Coach Landmesser knows these guys a lot bit more intimately than I do. He knows attitudes a lot better than I do, and that stuff comes into factor. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you my guess as to the protected list, and you guys let me know what you think via Twitter, via Facebook. You can always find me on Twitter, by the way, at TJ_Chillot, spelled CHILLOT, at TJ_Chillot on Twitter. You can also tweet in at RiverKings on Twitter or on Facebook. You can find us as well. Let us know what you think. Here we go. I'll give you the rundown. Forwards: Dan Tedesco, Dylan Fox, Ryan Marcoux, Derek Sutliff, Brantley Sherwood, and Ryan Saukeld. I'm going to give you a breakdown on each one of those. Dan Tedesco, I don't think needs an explanation. He was one of the top forwards on this team all season, and when he was here, he was scoring. When he was not here in the ECHL, we saw a significant dip in productivity. Dylan Fox, the same thing could be said about him. He was not on the RiverKings playoff roster as he took a call-up to play in Reading, and I think that hurt the team a little bit. He is a dynamic forward. He does a lot of things, finds open space. He draws so many penalties. He's so fast. I don't think you can question Dan Tedesco, and I don't think you can question Dylan Fox. By all means, do question me if you disagree. Ryan Marcoux, I think you have to protect him because he becomes one of your veterans on this team in the absence of Devin Mantha with his retirement. Ryan Marcoux is now one of your longest tenured players. So you got to protect him, and he did play very solid. When he was bumped up and playing first-line minutes with Devin Mantha due to the call-ups to Fox and Tedesco and Sutliff, and his big body and his ability to bump guys off the puck is really something that I'd like to see, and it's something that I think Coach Landmesser needs to have around because I'm willing to guarantee if Ryan Marcoux is here and playing, he will be wearing a letter on his chest again, just like he did last year. And I mentioned it earlier. I think he's in candidacy for the captain position. Derek Sutliff, much like Dylan Fox and Dan Tedesco, this is a guy, he's got offensive scoring ability. He's a top-line winger for you. Definitely have to hang on to him. Brantley Sherwood, not the most flashy guy on the ice in terms of numbers, numbers, but he's a leader in this locker room. He's a guy that brings a little bit of grit, even though he's not going to be one of your top 2 centermen or top 2 wingers, depending on where once he got bumped out to the wing, he was playing much better during the season. But either way, he's got that flexibility, so you can put him anywhere. Brantley Sherwood becomes another veteran guy on this team that you absolutely have to keep. The final forward that I would keep is Ryan Saukeld. Talk about a wonderful move Coach Landmesser made to bring Ryan Saukeld here. Finishing the season, Ryan Saukeld would break a RiverKings record for plus-minus in a season. Now, half the season did spend in Macon, but either way, his plus-minus in the 2017-18 year, he ended up with a complete record for the RiverKings, finishing with the highest plus-minus of anybody who's ever suited up. That is SPHL era and the CHL era. He ended up as a total for the season plus 30. He is plus 34 in his career, a plus 34. He's smart on the ice. That's what that tells me. Ryan Saukeld, got to hang on to it. So, for the forwards, I have 6 of them. Dan Tedesco, Dylan Fox, Ryan Marcoux, Derek Sutliff, Brantley Sherwood, and Ryan Saukeld. A lot of you guys are going to say, hey, what about Matt Harrington? What about Brian Arneson, Shane Bennett, Pius Rulavicius? We'll get to those guys in a minute because I think those are some of my bubble guys. Those are some of my guys that are on the bubble. Remember, Coach Landmesser is not nailed down to a specific set of. He doesn't have to take 6 forwards, 5 defensemen, 2 goalies. He can take any combination of those that he wants. So we'll get into that in just a second, where I think some of these guys may be. Defensemen, let's go ahead and knock on that door. Donald Oliveri, for sure. Vital Kote. I think both of the Latvians are back, Ralph Skrinbergs and Kristaps Bozovics, and the newcomer, Mark Whiteley. Let's start with Oliveri. I mentioned his name could be thrown around for captain candidacy. We'll see how that all shakes out, but he's an offensive defenseman. He's not the best defensively in terms of a defenseman. There was a couple times where he was a little late to the play and kind of let his guys sneak around him, but he's, again, a veteran presence on that D-core. And aside from Donald Oliveri, the only other real true veteran on that D-core would be Richie Coyne. Now, I don't have Richie Coyne on the protected list because I'm not sure, and this is, again, where being the head coach as opposed to being someone who's just talking about the team, Coach Landmesser is going to know what the real story is, but Richie Coyne spent a lot of the year on IR with various different injuries, so it really depends on what happened in the offseason, how he's feeling. Is he going to come back? Is he going to retire because of injuries? That's really where knowing that kind of information comes into play and is most important. So for right now, I have Richie Coyne on the bubble as well. Vital Kote spent a good portion of the year in the ECHL, but he's one of your truer defensive defensemen, and you got to hang on to him because, again, it goes back to that same theory. If guys in the ECHL want to pluck him for their teams, then obviously other teams in the SP are going to want him, so you got to throw the tag on him, and you got to go ahead and just protect him. Ralph Skrinbergs, Kristaps Bozovics, boy, those two guys really gelled towards the end of the season. I think between both of them, it's a good combination of offensive scoring and defensive shutdown mentality. I think both those guys are back here. And Mark Whiteley, he really, really surprised me. He's a big defenseman at 6'2". He's the kind of guy that, he came in towards the end of the year, at the end of his college career, and he played extremely well. Taking a look here at his numbers, 11 games played, he had 10 points, he had 2 goals, 8 assists, and was a +6. I know the plus-minus stat is dying and people don't like it, but it's still something that you can evaluate your defenseman on. If you have a guy that's way in the minus as a defenseman, you know that maybe he's a vulnerability on your team. Whiteley, in those 11 games, a +6. He really stood out to me, and I think he's going to be a cornerstone of this defensive unit going forward. So that's my D-core. Donald Oliveri, Vital Kote, Ralph Skrinbergs, Kristaps Bozovics, and Mark Whiteley are the 5 guys on defense. So you pair them with Tedesco, Fox, Marcoux, Sutliff, Sherwood, and Saukeld. That's 11 total names. So who's left? Tyler Green and Jared Rutledge. I think both goaltenders get protected this year simply because of the fact that it's the SPHL and goaltenders are such a premium. It's the best way. I took that long pause to see if I could think of another way I want to put it, but no, I really don't. Jared Rutledge, Tyler Green, they're valuable to this team because of the fact that goalies are so hard to come by in this league. Jared, we saw towards the end of the year, he really started to get some confidence, and Tyler Green in the playoffs was outstanding. He stood on his head, particularly in that second and third game, despite the fact that the team lost. So I think both of those guys are protected. Whether or not they're back, that remains to be seen. I wouldn't be surprised if Coach Landmaster does something similar to what he did last year in trading Pete DeSalvo. I wouldn't be surprised to see if one of these guys gets moved in the offseason to another team in exchange for some more firmness in the defensive core. So before I get to the bubble, I want to bring up two other names who are on this team's roster who may come into play here depending on how things went. And both of these guys played in Europe last year, Graham Strukoff and defenseman Nick Rivet. Both of them came over in the trade with Fayetteville that brought Tyler Green over. Neither one of them played here for the RiverKings this season, but that doesn't mean that's a guy that you can just not protect, because if you're talking to him and you're talking to Rivet, who's a defenseman, and the RiverKings certainly needed defensive help towards the end of the year, if you're talking to him and he says, hey, I want to come back, you're going to want to protect him. I don't think they get protected, and I think, Coach Landmaster just lets those guys go. But Graham Strukoff and Nick Rivet are two names to keep an eye on. So if you see them pop up on the official protected list and you go, wait a minute, what? Who are these guys? How can you protect them? They are two names that you want to keep an eye on. Let's bring back my bubble guys. Matt Harrington, Brian Arneson, Shane Bennett, and Pius Rulavicius. I'm going to say Pius Rulavicius and Shane Bennett they're even on the bubble of the bubble, simply because they did not play a lot towards the end of the year. When the games counted the most and the RiverKings needed to secure their playoff spot, and they were in the playoffs, and who was playing the most ice time, I did not see Rulavicius out there very much. I saw him out there in favor of Shane Bennett when Shane Bennett was ultimately benched towards I think it was the end of the second game when the RiverKings ended up losing. Don't quote me on that time frame, but Bennett ultimately was deemed to be the extra forward, and Rulavicius got his spot. And even when Rulavicius was in there, I didn't see a lot of production coming out of those two guys, so I think they're out. Brian Arneson's a curious case because he blew up. When he came into the RiverKings, he came in a little bit late. It was during that back-to-back series against Roanoke in November. I think it was the 11th or 12th. It might have been the 10th or the 11th. He came to the team, and he blew up on the scene, but it seemed like he did really well when he was on the top line. And the moment he was put back to a second or third line, when the RiverKings started getting some of their guys back, he kind of disappeared. And when you're talking about depth and when you're talking about production, you want to see those guys who can really succeed as first-line minute guys blow up the other lines and play stronger when they drop down into the third line minutes and make guys around them better. That was one thing Devin Mantha was so good at. Not only was he great on the ice, but he made everyone better. The moment Ryan Marcoux stepped into a winger position on Mantha's line when Tedesco and Sutliff both got called up, his production just came out of nowhere. So I want to see something like that from Brian Arneson, and I think because of the fact that he kind of just turned gray after a while and very vanilla, I think that's a reason why he's a bubble guy. We talked a little bit about Coyne and his injury, and I think the injuries, and I think that's why maybe, depending on what he wants to do, is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? He may be a bubble guy. And Matt Harrington, he's the other one. He's a little bit older, and I put him on the bubble for a different reason. I don't know if I necessarily use a tag from the protected list on him because I don't know what kind of interest he's going to garner from some other teams, being the age that he is. He's one of the oldest guys in the league. His production last year was not all that great. I think he's extremely valuable, but extremely valuable only to the Mississippi River Kings. And I think other teams out there see that, and I don't think they're going to want to go out and try and bring him in for fourth line minutes where he's not going to be happy. I just don't see that necessarily happening. I think if he's playing here for the River Kings, and I think much like Brantley Sherwood last year, he was not protected, and he ended up coming right back to the River Kings. I see that similar scenario playing out for Matt Harrington, assuming he comes back and is ready to play in the 18-19 series. So when I talk about those bubble guys, what does that mean, that they're on the bubble? I think they're guys that should Coach Landmaster decide to keep one goaltender. Or maybe he only wants to keep 5 forwards instead of the 6 that I named. Or maybe he only wants to keep 4 defensemen instead of the 5 that I named. I think any one of those guys could slide into that open spot. And again, there's so many things that go on during the offseason that really you can't predict. Guys wanting to go and play over in Europe. You talk about Kristaps Bozovics and Ralph Skrinbergs. They were solid defensemen for the River Kings this season. Maybe they feel they have a better chance playing in Europe, closer to home. I don't know. I have no idea. But these are I'm assuming everybody wants to be here and that Coach Landmaster has all the leverage and is going to reserve and protect whoever he wants. So one final time so you can wrap your head around it. Here's who I have as the River Kings protected list unofficially. Again, this is all opinion. If you want to know the official protected list, keep an eye on the River Kings Twitter, my Twitter, Facebook, as well as RiverKings.com. It will be announced the moment the league says, go ahead and get it out. We will have it out. Here is my prediction on this year's protected list. Forwards, Dan Tedesco, Dylan Fox, Ryan Marcoux, Derek Sutliff, Brantley Sherwood, and Ryan Saukeld. Defenseman Donald Oliveri, Vital Cote, Ralph Skrinbergs, Kristaps Bozovics, and Mark Whiteley, with the goaltenders Jared Rutledge and Tyler Green. That's my guess at the protected list. What Coach Landmaster does is entirely up to him, and he has all the information at his disposal, unlike myself, where I'm just taking some wild shots in the dark. So that's the protected list, and that's where I see it going. The River Kings had a disappointing end to the season, but I do think this team is full of bright spots. When you go back and you look at some of the storylines from the 3 players of the week in a row to end the year, Dylan Fox, Devin Mantha, wasn't Devin Mantha? I'm going to have to take a look. Maybe I'm forgetting. It was Dylan Fox, I know for sure. Dan Tedesco for sure. Brantley Sherwood, excuse me. So those were the 3 guys. It was Sherwood, Fox, and Tedesco, 3 in a row player of the week. That's awesome. To, a goaltender with the most wins in the SPHL, Tyler Green. To, there's a lot of great storylines that came out of this year. So it's going to be a fun and interesting 2018-19. I can't wait to see what other pieces join this team. We'll be on the lookout for some names that we saw in training camp last year to fill out the bottom of the roster, but really, who's going to step up and be that guy? At the beginning of, let's even go back to preseason last year, Dan Tedesco was not a rostered player. Remember, he was traded to the River Kings after playing 1 game in Pensacola. Flipping the page, other guys that were not on the roster last year that I think that are going to be huge pieces going forward. Mark Whiteley, the young defenseman. I think he's got a stellar future ahead of him here in the SPHL and possibly even beyond if he keeps up his work ethic and some of the things that he's doing. Other guys that were not on this roster to start the season that had big impacts. Donald Oliveri. That's another big guy that really had an impact. And Ryan Saukeld. Coach Landmaster got him for free. For free. So Coach Landmaster goes ahead, grabs Mike Moroso off waivers as a depth guy, and Moroso wants to be traded. So we go ahead and we trade him to make it. And in exchange, we get Ryan Saukeld, and Moroso is cut only 2 or 3 weeks into his tenure with the Macon Mayhem. The River Kings got him for free. Literally for free. The Dan Tedesco trade, that was Tedesco basically for Hertz. That worked out well for both teams. If you haven't had the chance to read my piece that I had written on the River Kings website, just go ahead and go to RiverKings.com. And under the Fans tab, there's TJ's thoughts, and I put together some thoughts on the end of the season, and particularly all of those trades. The Donald Oliveri for Robbie Hall trade, which is I mean, that's a no-brainer. And then, of course, the Shane Bennett, Cody Walsh for Jamie Hill. All these conversations, these transactions, I went ahead, put together in a conversation for you. So go ahead and check that out. RiverKings.com/TJS-thoughts. If you want to shortcut it, it's under the fans tab on RiverKings.com. So, those are huge pieces to build around. And when you talk about the success, what's going to happen with Fox? Is he maybe disenchanted with the ECHL? Is he maybe disenchanted with the fact that he was only getting fourth line minutes and was scratched a lot of the time and things like that? We'll find out. Same thing could be said for Sutliff. Same thing could be said for Cote. Where does Jake Schultz end up? He was playing in the ECHL consistently, so I think he maybe has stuck in the coast, and we may not ever see him back, but that's another interesting name to throw out there in terms of guys. So this team definitely has the strong cornerstones, and moving forward, there is no doubt whatsoever. We started the podcast off with this topic. There is no doubt that the loss to Devin Mantha is going to be a big one, but I have the utmost confidence in these guys that between Coach Landmesser, who's been here, he'll be going on his 8th season, plus the rest of the guys that are on this roster, the vets like your Harringtons, your Sherwoods, like your Marcuses, like your Oliveris, these guys will be able to pick up some of that slack for sure. You're not going to ever replace Devin Mantha, but you can come pretty darn close, if not find a new way to make it work. So I'm really excited for the 2018-19 season. Coming up, though, on our next couple podcasts, we're going to have a lot of things to talk about. I want to jump into the NHL a little bit, talk about what's going on once the Stanley Cup Finals start and we know officially who's going to be going at it for the end. We're also going to take a look at that protected list once it officially comes out. We'll break that down for you, and the RiverKings schedule, and at least their home schedule and home opponents, will be coming out pretty darn soon as per the league. Sometime in June is my prediction. So we'll go ahead and break down the schedules. Plus, we'll look at so much more. We'll touch on all the signings as they happen. Who's going to be here for training camp? How about some of the familiar faces? Are we going to see guys like Colton Wolter, CJ Hayes? Are we going to see any of those guys back that maybe were released earlier this year because of roster restrictions and limitations and things like that? I have my feelings on just about each and every one of those guys. So we'll touch base with some of that up in further editions of Crown Talk. Everybody, thanks for joining me on the maiden voyage, our inaugural Crown Talk. This is going to be a periodic podcast that we're going to put out with all of my opinions, my thoughts, things like that. I encourage you all to join in on the conversation. RiverKings.com will be the place to find all the official news, but if you disagree with me, something I said, something that you think I am outlandish about, go ahead. Don't be afraid. Give me a tweet at TJ_Chillot. That's CHILLOT at TJ_Chillot on Twitter. Hit us up on Facebook as well. The RiverKings Facebook page is always open. Thanks again for joining me for the initial version of Crown Talk presented by Exhibit A. We'll talk to you guys next time. Have a great one, everybody. Do you need banners? What about exhibit stands, pop-up displays? Exhibit A.
Who?
Exhibit A. They provide all of those things.
You mean all kinds of banners?
Yep. Banners, pop-up displays, anything for special events and trade shows, too.
Exhibit A, huh? How do I find them?
Give them a call, 901-867-7777.
That's easy enough. 867-7777.
Call Exhibit A for all your banners, pop-up displays, and even large, state-of-the-art exhibits, too. Exhibit A, 867-7777.